Hello and welcome to Inside Europe, the weekly current affairs podcast and radio programme from DW, Germany's international broadcaster. I'm Kate Laycock in Bonn. This week on the show, one of our own, DW investigative reporter Alican Uludag is jailed in Turkey. Our head of Turkish tells us why Alican's reporting matters.
Alican is one of the few well-regarded court reporters in whole Turkey. His work is defined by precision, careful verification, and deep understanding of legal procedures.
Also on the show, we mark the 4th anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine with both a reality check and a song of resistance. That's all coming up here on Inside Europe. It has happened again. For the second time in the space of a month, a DW journalist has been arrested. In January, DW's Niger correspondent Ghazali Abdou Tassawa was arbitrarily detained in the country's capital for reporting on migrants' living conditions. This time, it's the Turkish investigative reporter Alican Uludag. Alican was arrested late last week and is currently being held in pre-trial detention in Istanbul, accused of disseminating misleading information to the public, insulting the president, and insulting the Turkish nation, state and institutions. Charges grimly familiar to anyone who has been following President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's ongoing media crackdown. To understand more about the circumstances of Alican's arrest, I spoke to his boss, Erkan Arikan, head of DW Turkey.
Frankly, it was a nice Thursday evening. We're in the month of Ramadan, and I was breaking the iftar with my family when shortly before 6 p.m. A call from our lawyer received me, and he informed me that Alican had been arrested at his home in Ankara. And I was very scared. I said, hey, tell me what happened. And he said, according to the information that we have, around 30 police officers arrived in his residence and come with us and don't make any resistance. And Alican said goodbye to his wife and to his 2 children. And he said, okay, I'm going, but I will be back very soon. Of course, nobody knows that this will be an extraordinary voyage that he started. Instead of being brought to Ankara's prosecutor's office, as would be a normal standard procedure, he was transported not by plane but by car to Istanbul for many, many hours. Upon arriving in Istanbul, Alican had to wait until the next morning to give his statement to the prosecutor. And this took place on Friday late morning. So shortly about 1 p.m. German time, we received from the colleagues inside the courthouse and from our lawyers that the prosecutors were accusing Alican of insulting the president and that he would be placed in pre-trial detention.
And I understand that this charge of insulting the president, it goes back to posts on the platform X from about a year and a half ago. What can you tell me about the posts?
To be honest, this is something that we don't understand because Alican's case files contains a total of 22 posts on X. 9 of them were assigned to Article 301 of the Turkish Penal Code, publicity of insulting the Turkish nation or state institution. I have to read it because I don't know the right word. So it has frequently been used against journalists because this is the only penal code that the jurisdiction has in their hand to put the journalists into jail. And the remaining posts that were listed were insulting the president. It was also very not believable because Alican is a clear reporter. He knew for sure about using his phrases and about the sentences not to insult the president and not to spread disinformation and not publicity insult the Turkish nation. And in that case, to be honest, we don't know on which special tweet the prosecutors said this is an insultation of the president of Turkey. So we're still waiting. And frankly, we had a statement of the minister of jurisdictional, and he even didn't know either. He just spreading out any kind of information. He said, yeah, he's insulting the president. Yeah, we have insulting the Turkish nation and the state institutions, just to put him into jail.
What we do know, however, is Alican's work as an investigative reporter. And I would really like to invite you here to tell me about the type of stories that he was working on and the type of journalist that he is.
Thank you for this question. Yeah, I can say that I still get goosebumps when I'm starting to tell you about Alican. I can say that Alican is one of the few well-regarded court reporters in whole Turkey. His work is defined by precision, careful verification, and deep understanding of legal procedures. Because of his current state of Turkey's media landscape, it was largely through DW that his report reached a broader audience, of course. On social media, Alican has repeatedly faced accusations of being a German agent, claims that continued even after his arrest last week. Nonetheless, he returned to DW again and again because he believed that independent journalism remains both necessary and possible. Alican knew a lot of whistleblowers because those whistleblowers trust Alican very much. Alican was working previously on corruption issues, on clan criminality, you can say, I would say in Germany, about the mafia works in Turkey. And to be honest, I can say, as we say in Germany, I put my hand into fire for Alican.
Alican is obviously an extraordinary reporter and an extraordinary person. I can feel the warmth, just hearing you talk. Sadly, though, his case is by no means unique. So perhaps you could help me to understand how what is happening to Alican right now, and by extension to your department, fits into the wider pattern of restrictions, crackdowns on freedom of media, freedom of expression in Turkey under President Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
Alican is just a piece of the puzzle, you can say. We face in the couple of months and years, of course, that the work for journalism in Turkey is getting pretty stressy and pretty hard. As Deutsche Welle, we believe that as the media outlet of the Federal Republic of Germany, that the prosecutors and that the police will watch twice or three times before they say something about against us or put some of our colleagues into jail. But the time has changed. Recep Tayyip Erdogan is right now on the edge, we can say. He is trying to hold with both hands at this presidency, and he will not allow any kind of information which was leaked against him, which was leaked against his administration, against his ministers. The problem is that we are just a handful of journalists right now in Turkey who can frankly talk loud and clear, because many of the journalists have been into jail in the previous years. And if they be too loud, the possibility that they get into jail and into custody is very, very huge. So therefore, everybody is thinking twice before they're saying something on screen or writing something about. And Alican is one of a kind, I can say, who really knows what kind of words you have to use, as I said previously.
I would love to end with the words of Alican when you spoke to him. What message did he have?
His message was very clearly, Kate. He said, don't be silent. Don't be silent, like I will not be silent and you don't have to be silent as well. Spread it out. Freedom of speech and freedom of press is one of the most important things that we have. And help me to get out of this hell.
Dr. Ekran Arikan, head of DW Turkey, thank you so much for joining me.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much, Kayla Eacock. Thank you very much.
The German Journalists Association, by the way, is calling on Germany's foreign ministry to summon Turkey's ambassador in Berlin over Alican's arrest. We'll keep you updated on any developments.
Dear Ukrainian citizens, this morning President Putin announced a special military operation in Donbass. In many Ukrainian cities, explosions were heard. Today, calm is needed from each of you. I will talk to you soon. Don't panic. We are strong. We are ready for everything. We will win over anyone because we are Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine.
Всього ми всіх переможемо, бо ми – це Україна. Слава Україні!
Early this morning, Russian troops invaded Ukraine, a free and sovereign country. And once again, in the center of Europe, innocent women, men and children are dying of fear for their lives. We condemn this barbaric attack and the cynical arguments to justify it. It is President Putin who is bringing war back to Europe.
The sounds there of the first few days of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which began on February 24th, 2022, as reported here on Inside Europe. 4 years on, and the United States has reportedly set a June deadline for Kyiv and Moscow to reach a peace deal. But meanwhile, on the ground, the fighting continues, as do the casualties and the suffering. William Denslow takes stock.
It's a bumpy but well-travelled route for Alexander Volkov and the mobile medical team. Its visit is to a village about 20 kilometres from the front lines, near the town of Shevchenkova, a few hours' drive from Kharkiv. Along the way, we pass several military checkpoints and roads being hastily covered with netting to protect vehicles from the threat of Russian drones. The community's home to roughly 300 people. The nearest hospital is only 10 kilometres away, but with heavy snowfall, the constant threat of enemy strikes, as well as power outages being a common occurrence, medical visits like this are a lifeline for people living so close to the front lines.
People have no energy, no warming, and very worse life with these conditions. Okay, so we need to help people who lived there, who lived in these conditions.
The International Rescue Committee, or IRC, and its local partners complete approximately 11,000 outpatient consultations like this each month, across around 80 locations in the country. But this is a health crisis that goes far beyond rural communities living close to the fighting. According to data from the IRC, roughly 60% of households across Ukraine lack sufficient heating. While Russia denies deliberately targeting civilian energy infrastructure, the IRC also estimates that 1 in 5 Ukrainian families are suffering from health issues as a result of cold indoor conditions. Lesia Orobets, a founder of The Price of Freedom and a former member of the Ukrainian parliament, says it's part of a broader demoralization campaign against the population to win concessions in peace negotiations.
People in large cities were sitting in cold with no electricity, no heat, no water for weeks. And that was Russia pressing on us and terrorizing us to sign the ugly deal.
US officials say meaningful progress has been made during the various rounds of trilateral talks held this year between delegations from Washington, Moscow and Kyiv. But substantial sticking points remain, particularly on the political side, on issues such as who gets to control territory in the Donbass region. Ukraine accuses Russia of stalling the negotiations, a view shared by the European Union's Foreign Affairs Chief, Kai Callas.
They are not willing to talk about anything political. So, of course, we have seen a lot of pressure on Ukraine to concede and give up what they are not willing to give up. But it doesn't bring long-term peace. So I'm not that optimistic that we will see any results in coming weeks and months.
The Kremlin says it's committed to negotiations, but maintains that its own security concerns need to be addressed, a point Ukraine and its allies reject. Former US Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs, Dr. Celeste Wallander, says more pressure is needed on Moscow to help break the deadlock.
There are areas of the Russian economy that remain unsanctioned, and there are many policies to stop Russia from being able to wiggle out of the sanctions through various means, backdoor means with international partners. And to keep the economic pressure on Russia is probably as important, if not more important, than the military pressure to arrive at a just peace.
The Trump administration has called for a peace plan to be in place by the summer. For that to happen, Ukraine is calling for robust, lasting and legally ironclad security guarantees. Here's defense expert and co-founder of the think tank We Build Ukraine, Alexandra Zarkina.
The victory is exactly to make sure that Russia cannot repeat the act of aggressions against Ukraine. And actually we have an opportunities to normal life, the opportunities to keep growing, keep developing, and yes, at some point we definitely will bring all the territories back as well.
In any case, Ukraine needs help. The EU has lined up a loan worth over $100 billion to help provide military and budgetary support for the next 2 years. But Hungary's threatened to block this, as well as a 20th Russian sanctions package, due to a dispute with Ukraine over the supply of Russian oil. As Ukrainians continue to endure a bitterly cold winter, there are fears that a freeze to their support will only help prolong the conflict. William Denslow, DW, Kyiv.
We're marking 4 years of war this week, but also 4 years of Ukrainian resistance and bravery. More in just a minute. When Vladimir Putin launched his full-scale invasion of Ukraine on February 24th, 2022, he believed that his so-called special military operation would be over very quickly. Documents captured from Russian units suggest planners expected to conclude major operations within about 10 days, with Kyiv falling early in the campaign. They'd not reckoned on two things: the decisiveness of Ukraine's president and the resilience of its people. That resilience, born of a shared understanding of the existential nature of their struggle to protect not only their democracy, but their language and culture as well, often finds its expression in song. Back in 2022, The World broadcast a story by Daniel Offman looking at the history and meaning of one song in particular.
When Ukraine's military liberated Kherson city in southern Ukraine, residents took to the streets in celebration. They waved Ukrainian flags, honked horns, and sang the national anthem. There's another song, though, that's become a kind of second anthem. People sang it all around Kherson city when it was liberated. They sang it while standing in line to get clean water, and here in the town square as kids jumped around and danced. The song is called Oi Uluzi Chervona Kalina.
So the title literally just means oh, the red viburnum in the meadow, right? It sounds perfectly innocent, but then it goes from there to kind of be a deeply patriotic song about defending Ukraine from invaders.
That's Maria Sanavitsky. She's a professor of anthropology and music at Bard College. The Czervona kalina, or red viburnum, is a leafy shrub peppered with clusters of blood-red berries. Sanavitsky says the kalina is closely identified with Ukrainian poetry and music.
Often Ukrainian folkloric songs will open with a naturalistic image, something kind of innocent sounding, a tree, a bird, or a kalina very often. And from that kind of opening image, you unspool a kind of metaphor or a story about politics or about the complexities of life. And that's the case here too.
Most believe the lyrics were inspired by a song from the 17th century.
But it's in 1914 or so that a Ukrainian composer adds the verses that we still sing today. And that's when it really becomes closely associated with the Sich riflemen, who were this Ukrainian unit inside of the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the time.
In 1914, what is now Ukraine was divided among neighboring countries, including Russia and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But around World War I, some Ukrainians hoped to establish an independent country. Here's Andrei Zerenyuk. He's a history professor at the University of Winnipeg.
This was the original hope of Ukrainians, of the Ukrainian national movement when they entered the war, right? They believed that this war could become a revolution and would change the geopolitics in Eastern Europe.
But after the war, Ukraine was folded into the Soviet Union. And under that system, many Ukrainian patriotic songs like Czervona kalina were banned.
This one was too nationalist, it was banned because it was connected with this Ukrainian national liberation struggle. And then it reappeared at the end of the 1980s.
Just a few years later, the Soviet Union collapsed and an independent Ukraine emerged. Maria Sanavitsky says the song had never really left the memory of Ukrainians.
What is, of course, new and striking in this moment is the degree to which a few days after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia, it became a viral hit and it really pinged around the world.
That's because musician Andriy Khlivnyuk, lead singer of the Ukrainian band Boombox, had posted his version of the song on Instagram.
Ой, у лузі червона калина похилилася.
You see Khlivnyuk in military fatigues, standing in front of this iconic site in downtown Kyiv, the St. Sophia Cathedral complex. And he sings it in a very kind of boomboxy way. Fans of the band would recognize it.
А ми тую червону калину підіймемо.
But even as this version of the song goes viral, songs like Czervona kalina are still banned in Russian-occupied territories. People have been fined or even arrested for singing it. And when Ukrainian territory is liberated...
You see these scenes from recently liberated Kherson where people literally on the very first night built a huge bonfire in the center of town because there's no electricity. And they sang this song right at the top of their lungs to kind of proclaim their freedom. It's incredibly moving.
This war has made Czervona kalina even more meaningful for many Ukrainians, representing their defiance in the face of Russia's invasion.
That story by Daniel Offman was first broadcast by The World in 2022. Find The World wherever you get your podcasts. This is Inside Europe. I'm Kate Laycock in Bonn.
I'm Carolyn Beeler.
And I'm Marco Werman. We're with The World, Public Radio's leading global news program.
We cover the biggest news events developing every day and give you the context you need to make sense of them.
And Carolyn, I also like our smaller stories, tales of discovery and human kindness, things that make us laugh.
Stories that kind of shrink our world and make us feel more connected.
Subscribe and listen every weekday to The World.
When headlines get louder, we go deeper.
Say hello to Berlin Briefing,
Your guide to Germany's impact on the world. Between East and West, autocrats and democrats, Germany's whole system is under stress.
pressure from all sides.
And the world around Germany is getting more dangerous.
Is democracy glitching? Too much noise? Too little clarity?
We decode what it means for you. From Berlin to right where you are.
It's all in Berlin Briefing on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Inside Europe, the weekly current affairs podcast and radio programme from DW, Germany's international broadcaster, with me, Kate Laycock, in Bonn. Coming up this next half hour, return to Hatay, Turkey 3 years after the quake. The Teddy Awards at 40, the world's first major prize for queer cinema, refuses to age apolitically. And a Prague exhibition explores Robert Fico's attempt to assert control over Slovakia's cultural institutions.
First, they said it was because the gallery was empty. Then because it was too full. Then it was because there was no flag outside the building. Then something to do with renovation. They never said the real reason.
First, though, to France, where the fatal beating of a 23-year-old far-right militant by a group of far-left militants in Lyon earlier this month could have seismic political implications, and not just for municipal elections in March. Some of the 11 people arrested after the killing are former members of the now-banned group La Jeune Garde, or Young Guard, perceived to be close to France's left-wing populist party France Unbowed. This party has had considerable electoral success in recent years, thanks in large part to an alliance with the more centrist socialists, communists and ecologists. However, the party's response, or rather lack of it, to the Lyon murder is now threatening to bring that alliance to an end. This report from our Paris reporter, John Lawrenson.
Personne ne devrait mourir à 23 ans. Personne ne devrait mourir pour ses idées.
No one should die at 23 and no one should be killed for their ideas, said the President of the National Assembly, Yael Braun-Pivet, before asking France's elected representatives to observe a minute's silence in honour of Quentin Deranque.
Je vous demande d'observer une minute de silence.
What we know about the killing is that Deranque was part of a group of far-right militants who'd come to Lyon's Sciences Po political science school in order to, by their own account, provide security to members of a feminist identitarian group, Nemesis Collective. The group was protesting an invitation given to far-left France Unbowed politician Rima Hassan, who has drawn controversy for describing Hamas's October 7th, 2023 attack on Israeli civilians as legitimate action. Deranque was in a side street with other members of his group when they were set upon by a large group of masked militants, some of whom reportedly had iron bars. His group fled, but Deranque was caught and so severely beaten that he later died of his head injuries in hospital. The Lyon prosecutor says at least 6 individuals took part in the fatal beating. They include Jacques-Élie Favreau, a parliamentary assistant to France Unbowed lawmaker Raphaël Arnaud, who founded the now-dissolved anti-fascist group the Young Guard. Other men in custody are also believed to be part of this proscribed organisation. The Deranque killing has sparked the most serious attempt yet to mark France Unbowed, France's most successful left-wing party in recent years, as being outside the realm of mainstream political acceptability.
Merci pour votre agressivité une fois de plus. Mais
in a heated exchange in Parliament, Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu accused France Unbowed of trying to relativise the gravity of the Deranque killing and called on the party to clean up the alleged violence of its political discourse, its ideas, and above all, to root out all violent elements from its ranks.
Le ménage dans vos rangs.
Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre.
France, like some other European countries, is very familiar with the cordon sanitaire strategy typically used against the far right. The other parties have so far kept Marine Le Pen's National Rally Party out of power because they have agreed to bury their differences, unite against it, and above all, make no alliances with it. Is a cordon sanitaire against France Unbowed a possibility now too? Politicians on the right and far right have been calling for this for some time. Now, the leaders of the centre parties, close to President Macron, for example, agree. And so do some leading figures on the left. Former Socialist President François Hollande, who is hoping to run for the presidency again next year, said he would have no dealings with France Unbowed, as did the centre-left's most popular leader, Raphaël Glucksmann.
Nous ne pouvons faire aucune alliance électorale avec la France insoumise.
We cannot make any electoral alliance with France Unbowed. There are too many differences, too much opposition, too much contradiction between us. The brutalization of public debate is a deadly danger for democracy. And that is what France Unbowed and its leader Jean-Luc Mélenchon have been doing for the last weeks and months, brutalizing the public debate, publishing lists of enemies, making accusations of genocide, calling people fascists, enemies to be eliminated. I don't want that for my country.
Et je ne veux pas cela pour mon pays.
An opinion poll carried out in the wake of the Deranque killing shows 76% of the French think the socialists should no longer ally themselves with France Unbowed. Political analyst Christophe Barbier says it will now be difficult for the left to reform the electoral coalitions of recent years.
Il y a eu la NUPES en 2022, le nouveau Front Populaire en 2024. On a du mal à...
The left united for the parliamentary elections in 2022 and 2024. It is hard to imagine that now. There are two lefts and they are irreconcilable. Today, those who want to break any alliance between the Socialist Party and France Unbowed have the upper hand. A reformation of the new Popular Front for the municipal elections now and the presidential elections next year looks unlikely. But the other consequence is that this facilitates the union of the right. If the main enemy, the main danger is France Unbowed, everything is permitted to stop them, including an alliance between the center-right Republicans and the far-right National Rally. We could start seeing this in the coming weeks even. The Quentin Deranque affair and the attitude of France Unbowed do not only ruin the union of the left, they facilitate the union of the right.
Quentin et l'attitude de LFI ne ruinent pas seulement l'union des gauches, elles facilitent l'union des droites.
Critics of France Unbowed's creator and leader, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, say it has violence in its DNA, pointing to his speech in 2010 in which he said everything must be made into conflict, saying that he was the noise and the fury, the uproar and the agitation. He has denied that his party has anything to do with the attack in Lyon, but as for the proscribed anti-fascist Young Guard collective, some of whose former members are being held in custody for Deranque's killing, he refuses even now to distance himself from it. This was relatively easy for Mélenchon's allies to ignore in the past. It could be passed off as rhetoric, as posturing. It will be more difficult to do so now that a man has been murdered. John Lawrenson, DW, Paris.
3 years ago this month, I remember speaking to DW reporter Natalie Carney, who'd been one of the first international journalists to push on to the heart of the disaster zone in the immediate aftermath of the devastating earthquake which killed some 53,500 people in southern and central Turkey, as well as several thousand others in neighbouring Syria. Her accounts were harrowing, and the chaos and panic in the background clearly audible. Recently, Natalie retraced her steps and sent us this report on Turkey's post-quake regeneration.
At the covered bazaar in the central Turkish city of Kahramanmaraş, Kemal Akçu and his team are busy preparing traditional local Maraş çörek pastry. Kemal's father was famous for his Maraş çörek, but on February 6, 2023, he was killed in a series of earthquakes that shook the region, reducing entire towns to rubble. Kemal also lost his mother, brother, sister, her 3 sons, his brother-in-law, cousins, and aunt that night. Now running the family bakery, Kemal honors them each year on the anniversary, keeping their memories alive. It was a painful experience for us, and we are still constantly affected by it, he tells me. This evening, he will distribute his pastries at a nearby cemetery, to families, visitors, and all the ancestors of the victims, he says. Close to 13,000 people were killed in Kahramanmaraş province, the epicenter of the earthquake, which took more than 53,500 lives and injured more than 100,000 across a roughly 120,000 square kilometer area. A devastating toll caused not only by the natural disaster, but, many argue, by substandard construction in the buildings that collapsed. Branded the disaster of the century, what followed officials call the construction of the century. Where damaged buildings once stood, new structures now rise. They are, according to Turkey's Minister of Urbanization and Climate Change, Murat Kurum, built with some of the most advanced construction methods available.
We didn't just replace damaged buildings with new ones in the earthquake zone. We also carried out detailed planning based on soil surveys, using renewable energy sources, being zero waste compliant, and not exceeding 4 to 5 floors plus ground floor.
New roads, hospitals, schools, social spaces, and workshops have also been built. Historical artifacts and places of worship have been meticulously restored brick by brick, and nearly 200 new homes and businesses have been completed in Hatay province, the worst affected, including close to 6,000 along Ataturk Street.
I have been coming to Hatay since about 2011, the start of the civil war in Syria, and I'm very familiar with a lot of the locations. This street, one of the main streets along the river here, looks so drastically different from what it had in the past. It's incredible to see the changes that are being made here.
Hatay tradesman Abdulrahman Güçgün is very happy with what the government has accomplished so far. They are working day and night, he tells me. May God bless them. Hatay is famed for its ancient craftsmanship and rich artistry, much of which was centered in Uzun Karşı, or the Long Bazaar, on the other side of the Asi River, which runs through the city.
I was born here.
Here, I met Mehmet Sarkan Sincan in one of the new workshops and storefronts that have replaced the rubble. He now runs the nostalgic Dukan Antakya antique shop, but spent part of his childhood in Germany. He was quick to show me a picture.
It's me. Germany time. We was in Germany, you see.
I ask him if he speaks German.
Natürlich. Good Deutsch.
But he continues in English.
It was very hard. It was bad days. But right now we are wake up. Before the earthquake was many people. But after the earthquake, now starts this year. And with the April time, everything will be green. And the tourists will come back here.
Yet not everyone is as optimistic. Local resident Naim Sautolu doesn't believe the hype. Our esteemed president completed Ataturk Street with love, he says, adding a somewhat sarcastic thank you. But he challenges, is anyone living there? You say we opened it, but which part did we open? Is it finished? You say it's finished. Where are the shops? Where are the tradesmen? The light is on, but there's no one inside. While many of the government's promised 455,000 new homes across the disaster zone have been handed over, with thousands more to be delivered this summer, it's still not enough to house the approximately 160,000 people that still live in temporary container settlements in Hatay alone. Empty back streets, shuttered businesses, and ongoing demolition work define a city still scarred by that deadly night. Look at the roads, Naim says. The roads are in terrible condition. There is no water, and the electricity keeps going out. Let the friends who left come back to the country. More than 2.5 million people were displaced by the earthquakes, while tourism to the affected areas has dropped significantly, leaving many survivors still with limited income opportunities 3 years on. The Turkish government says it has rebuilt bigger and better, but the real test won't just be whether these buildings will survive the next quake, it's whether those living and working in them can truly rebuild their lives. Natalie Carney, Deutsche Welle, Southern Turkey.
We have to stay out of politics because if we made movies that are dedicatedly political, we enter the field of politics, but we are the counterweight to politics. We are the opposite of politics.
Yes, the Berlinale Film Festival may be over, but that assertion by jury president Wim Wenders is still bothering me. After all, as far back as Shakespeare, Hamlet was urging actors to hold, as 'twere, the mirror up to nature to show virtue her own feature, scorn her own image, and the very age and body of the time his form and pressure. Also, as curator Canan Turan pointed out in her interview with Laura Kabelka last week, the Berlinale itself has a rich and rebellious history in which politics and art are inextricably intertwined. And perhaps no more so than in the Teddy Award for queer cinema. Arts journalist Brendan O'Shea sent us this tribute to the Rebel Breakout project, which became a cinematic institution.
40 years of the Teddy Awards. 40 years? Yeah.
This year, the Teddy, the world's first major prize for queer cinema, turned 40. Founded in 1987, when LGBTQ+ stories were marginalised or censored, it helped move queer filmmaking from the fringes into the cultural mainstream.
40 years of fighting for queer cinema, 40 years for art, for freedom of expression, for freedom of speech.
The recipient of the Teddy's 2026 Special Award was filmmaker Celine Sciamma, whose films, including Portrait of a Lady on Fire and Tomboy, have reshaped contemporary queer cinema.
More than an award, the Teddy is a very important archive of the last 40 years of queer cinema. And our archives are not our past. They are the datas of our alternative world and ideas and desires.
An archive not only of what was, but of what might be. Though conceived as a counterpoint to the Berlinale's top prize, the Golden Bear, the Teddy asserted that queer stories were not peripheral, but artistically and politically vital. In 1992, the award was officially incorporated into the festival programme, a symbolic shift from the margins to the centre of European film culture. The roots of queer cinema in Berlin stretch back to the 1970s. Pioneering filmmaker and activist Rosa von Braunheim used the camera to confront prejudice and examine LGBTQ+ lives with radical frankness. Von Braunheim, who died in late 2025, made his mark with the 1971 film titled "It's Not the Homosexual Who is Perverse, but the Society in Which He Lives."
Daniel ist verzweifelt und einsam. Versucht sich in der hysterischen Welt seiner neuen Stammkneipe mit Alkohol und Zigaretten zu betäuben.
Von Braunheim shook up queer cinema, using film to demand visibility, confront social norms, and explore taboo topics from AIDS to aging, mixing fiction, documentary, and performance along the way. The film, It Is Not the Homosexual Who is Perverse, but the Society in Which He Lives, challenged both mainstream society and the gay community itself by exposing homophobia and hypocrisy, while pushing the gay community to confront its own blind spots. Co-founder Wieland Speck.
That film was one of the opening films of the Forum of that time. And later, 10 years later, Manfred Salzgeber started the Panorama. Internationally, people started to look at Berlin and see, oh, something is happening for queer film. Let's go there.
Film scholar Skadi Loist, a member of the 2026 Teddy jury, describes the broader function of festivals like the Berlinale.
They are a temporary public sphere where you discuss the newest films, the newest politics, the newest identity trends, the newest fights within the community and politically outside.
The Teddy didn't just reward films, says co-founder Wieland Speck. It created a space where queer cinema could exist collectively, debated, celebrated and contested.
Berlin has a critical audience, and I could, year after year, bring in some 100,000 people in 10 days for difficult films.
The Teddy, says jury member Skadi Loist, mirrors the tensions felt within the queer community itself.
I think the discussion about gay versus lesbian versus trans versus queer, I know that has changed, but it's part of that history, like it is everywhere with the queer community. Although I think the issue with not enough women filmmakers and lesbian content is still happening.
And as Teddy board member and today's head of Panorama, Michael Stutz, explains, the influence went beyond Berlin.
Festivals that are placed within big urban spaces or cities are very different from festivals that are sort of in resorts, I would say, because you can rely on this audience so deeply. And this is something that we treasure immensely, also going into the future, because without an audience, it doesn't really... What do you do without an audience, So
visibility here is not abstract. It can determine whether a film secures distribution, screens in countries where queer festivals face political pressure, or reaches audiences who might otherwise never encounter these stories. 40 years on, however, the landscape has shifted. Streaming platforms have globalized access. Viewers are no longer dependent on physical festivals to encounter queer narratives. For filmmaker Celine Sciamma, the central question endures.
If I have to look back on this work, I would say that the common question that animates each of the films, the first of all, and which remains alive, is always, what can cinema do? These days, it's mostly painful. These days, the most important cameras are in Palestine, they are in Tehran, in Ukraine, in Calais, in Minneapolis. The most important cameras are in the hands of those who resist, protest, bear witness.
Beyond representations, Sciamma asks whether cinema can imagine entirely different social possibilities.
How about experimenting a queer anarchist society, a world not built on family ties? How about experimenting a successful rebellion or an attractive genderless world?
A provocative idea, especially at a moment when LGBTQ+ rights are again contested in parts of Europe and beyond. Co-founder Wieland Speck recognizes that shift.
The solidarity factor is more necessary than ever, especially in the time of backlash that we all feel and we all know and we can analyze it, and it's there.
In 2026, the Teddy Award remains less a trophy than a question. What can cinema do? It stands at the heart of one of the world's most visible film festivals where, for 10 days each February, a temporary public sphere forms. Films flicker, audiences argue, and histories resurface. And the archive grows, frame by frame, storing not only stories of struggle, but blueprints for futures not yet lived. For DW, this is Brendan O'Shea in Berlin.
And you can send your blueprints for futures not yet lived to insideeurope@dw.com. I await them with interest. I'm in my happy place now, so let's have one more art story before we part. It's about an exhibition in the Czech capital Prague, which is detailing the political struggle for cultural expression in neighbouring Slovakia under the populist government of Robert Fico. Called Free National Gallery, Description of a Struggle, it documents the dismissals, resignations, strikes and standoffs in Bratislava as a renowned cultural institution was steadily brought under political control. From Prague, Rob Cameron reports.
The scene at Bratislava's Slovak National Gallery in September last year, ahead of the opening of an exhibition of modern Slovak art called Bang Bang. The exhibition was met by protests because the artworks were being displayed without the consent of their creators. The gallery said that as the owner of the works, it had the right to exhibit them as it saw fit. It was the latest instalment in what has widely been described as chaos at the National Gallery since former TV presenter Martina Šimkovičová, an MP for the far-right Slovak National Party who shot to fame on YouTube spreading conspiracy theories about COVID, was put in charge of Slovakia's culture ministry in 2023.
Aký je tam konflikt záujmov? Aký? A čo s tým ako? A čo v tej...
Šimkovičová said she wanted official Slovak culture to better represent what she called traditional Slovak values, rather than work that explored liberal or LGBTQ+ themes. Within her first few months in office, she'd sacked the heads of the Slovak National Library and the Slovak National Theatre. Alexandra Kusar had been the Slovak National Gallery's director for 14 years until she signed a letter in support of her fellow directors. She too was promptly fired.
First, they said it was because the gallery was empty. Then because it was too full. Then it was because there was no flag outside the building. Then something to do with renovation. They never said the real reason, that they simply didn't want to work with us, which is a shame because it was the truth. But it was also impossible to work with them too. They're not interested in cooperation. They're not even interested in culture. They have this feudal idea of management. My person, your person. You can't work with someone like that. It's another universe. It's not even a matter of having a different opinion about culture. They're living in a different universe.
That is almost literally true. The Culture Ministry official behind the changes is famous for telling an interviewer that because he hadn't been into space, he couldn't say for sure whether the Earth is round. After Kusar's sacking, more than 100 curators and other staff quit. The vast majority of artists refused to allow their work to be shown. Many of the rooms are empty. Major exhibitions have been cancelled. International partners have withdrawn. It is, in Alexandra Kusar's words, a house of ghosts.
Officially enter the exhibition.
Last summer, activists set up a symbolic protest space next door, the Free National Gallery, in direct opposition to the Slovak National Gallery. Detailing all that is a new exhibition at the Prague City Gallery called Free National Gallery, Description of a Struggle.
Architecture and building up the new...
It was this our relationship with the Slovak creators.
The gallery's director, Magdalena Juzíková, says what's happened in Slovakia carries a clear warning for other countries, including here in the Czech Republic, where a conservative populist government took power in January. The ministry's remit in both countries extends to the national broadcasters. In Slovakia, critics say that institution has already been gutted and brought to heel. Public TV and radio here in the Czech Republic is still regarded as mostly free from political interference for now.
Why we do this exhibition to show that all that things are happen very quickly, rapidly, and the open society is under the pressure. Nobody knows what will happen because we are only a few months under this government. But there are problems with the financing of public TV and radio, so those are the first steps. Yeah.
Recently, Slovakia's culture minister Martina Šimkovičová visited Prague, part of a gradual thawing of relations under Czech Prime Minister Andrej Babiš after a chilly few years. She met her Czech counterpart Otto Klempiš, who caused some alarm by telling reporters afterwards that the Slovaks were ahead of the Czechs in reforming their funding of public media, saying she'd advised him on what pitfalls to avoid. He's previously defended the Czech licence fee. It's now unclear for how much longer. For DW, this is Rob Cameron in Prague.
You can't hermetically seal off the realm of culture from the realm of politics, and if you try to, that in itself is a deeply political act. That's my takeaway anyway, and quite possibly the hill that I am prepared to die on. This programme was produced by Laura Kabelka and me, Kate Laycock. Our sound engineer was Gerd Georgi. Inside Europe comes to you from DW in Bonn.